You're listening to Radio Looks Listen. I'm your host, Steve Matthews. Thank you for joining me for our big episode 135 tonight. The title of this episode is It's MAGA in America. Now, if you're an old-time Gen Xer like I am, you might get the reference where I got that title. It's actually from a campaign slogan of Ronald Reagan when in 1984. That was the first year I voted. Was 1984. Ronald Reagan was the first president I ever voted for, and he had a slogan that's kind of well known, probably the best known slogan that, at least from that year anyway. He had an ad campaign. It's called "It's Morning in America." So anyway, I decided to use that for the title of my program tonight. It's MAGA in America. And of course, that's also not only a reference to Ronald Reagan, but it's also a reference to the upcoming inauguration in just a couple of days. And that's something that I think a lot of us probably never thought that we'd see. We never thought, we had hoped to see Donald Trump back in the White House here, but I wasn't really sure it was going to happen. I think I've said this before on some programs that I've done that I had this friend of mine, a friend I've known him for years. We always get together for lunch a week or two before Christmas, just talk things over. And we in December of 2023 we met, and we both went away saying, it's going to be interesting next year when we get together, because in December 2024, that is, because we might be living in a whole new world. That's what we were thinking. And there were a lot of pretty dire predictions going into 2024. There can be riots. We're going to have another George Floyd kind of thing, or maybe there's going to be another COVID kind of a situation, or maybe the Democrats are going to steal the election by all the tens of millions of illegal aliens they brought into the country. I mean, just you can come up with all kinds of scenarios, and in truth, I mean, it wasn't crazy to think about these things. I mean, you really, as an American, seeing what went on in 2024, you say, well, what's the likelihood of this happening again? My base case going into 2024 was, well, how are you going to vote your way out of this? I mean, if they stole the election in 2020, that was my basic thesis, and it still is. Why could we trust the elections in 2024? But I think that we actually had a surprisingly normal election. It's surprisingly uneventful. Now, I think the Dems did do some rigging at some of the congressional level races. I do suspect that went on, but the presidential election seemed, at least in my view, to be pretty clean. And it seemed really as if the American establishment made, to some extent, peace with Donald Trump, and finally realized that it's going to be hard to keep him out of office. I think it would have been kind of hard to convince the country that Kamala Harris won that election, because Donald Trump was so very obviously really functioning as president. I'd say even before the election, but he's really been effectively president really since the November 5th election. I don't know if you're familiar with the term quiet quitting. I mean, that was kind of a popular idea maybe a couple years back, and it was talking about how employees really shouldn't be going over and above and working extra hours for free and this kind of thing. They should go in, do their job, and go home. And not be overly devoted to their employers. Call it quiet quitting. Well, some people have talked about Joe Biden quiet quitting as a president, and I think there's some truth to that. I mean, he's been pretty scarce here the last couple months, and I guess a little bit over a couple months since the election. I guess it's probably about 10 weeks or so from the election to the inauguration. It used to be they had the inauguration was in March, I understand. At least as recent as the 1930s, and maybe it was after that. I'm not sure when they shifted it to January. But if it had been like it was back in the day, then I guess we'd still have a couple more months. We'd have to wait, maybe a couple more months where Joe Biden could issue all kinds of crazy pardons and these types of things. I've was talking to mom today about this, and I know we both are sitting here kind of wondering, well, what's what kind of last minute outrage is Joe going to try here? I don't know. It should be interesting to see if some last minute announcement comes. I have to admit, I'm kind of expecting it. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'll be wrong about that. Maybe he's done everything that he's going to do at this point. But I'm just always a little bit skeptical. Well, anyway, let's see here. Just a few things I wanted to share with you here, just about the inauguration. Let's see. Here's one. Let's see here. We'll get a few stories up, and yeah, here's one story. This is from, let's see, there we go, and this is from the Epoch Times. This is Trump inaugural event kicks off today. What to know? And it just goes through here, talks some about the swearing-in ceremony. 4 days of celebration surrounding President-elect Donald Trump's second inauguration starting January the 18th. That's today. And they begin with a reception and fireworks at Trump National Golf Club in Sterling, Virginia on Saturday, and then with the national prayer service on Tuesday. Both Trump and Vice President-elect J.D. Vance will be sworn in at 12 p.m. Eastern Time on Monday, with three former presidents, Barack Obama, George W. Bush, and Bill Clinton, expected to attend. While the event is traditionally held outside on the Capitol steps, it has been moved indoors due to freezing temperatures. According to forecasts, the inauguration is set to be the coldest in 40 years. Yeah, there's one of these. They've got different words for this sort of thing. Some of these just call them Alberta Clippers, but I think maybe there's a different term for it they use, or an Arctic. Maybe it'll come to me. They call it an Arctic something or another. Arctic vortex, I think that's the word for it. Arctic vortex. So there's this jet stream that kind of goes around the North Pole, but sometimes that jet stream, for whatever reason, it dips down south, and you get a blast of some really nasty Arctic air this time of year. And I know we've got forecasts in the single digits for at least a couple days next week. I think maybe that even starts tomorrow. In fact, let me take a look at this here. Kind of interesting to see. Had a snowstorm on a Sunday a couple weeks back. Maybe we'll get the privilege of freezing tomorrow morning. We'll see here. This will be a good test for our church's new boiler. They had to put in a new boiler. Yeah, here we go. Yeah, Sunday we have a low of 8 degrees, and they're calling for maybe snow tomorrow. Then Monday we have a low of 3 degrees. Then Tuesday we have a -1. Wednesday -3. So those are our lows. Now most of those days we get up at least up to 30 tomorrow, but we're in the teens Monday and Tuesday for a high, and then a high of 24 on Wednesday. So that's kind of January, and I know I've got a good friend of mine, good brother in Christ in Sydney, Australia. He probably watches or listens to this. And John, if you're listening, you're a lot better off in Sydney than we are here in Cincinnati. That's all I can tell you. I'd be happy to trade places with you, brother. Anyway, I write him. Sometimes I'll send him some stuff. He always texts me back and he'll just say, "I'd die." Oh, and I have to say, I've lived in Ohio almost all my life, and I still don't like winter. I don't know. There's some people that maybe like that stuff. Maybe some sick, sadistic people out there, but I'm not one of them. And frankly, I'm happy to see it go. But I guess it's one of those things you just kind of learn to put up with, and that's what I do. You just kind of put up with January. I think most people in these parts would probably tell you kind of just put up with January and February. And then March it starts to get a little bit better, which isn't that far away. I mean, we're only looking maybe about another 6 weeks or so. And hey, it's going to be March, and you're going to start seeing the first spring flowers come up. So, it's actually not too far. We're getting there. The sun staying up later at night. We've gained about 25 minutes of daylight. I've got this Yahoo weather app, and it shows what time the sun sets, and right around the 21st of December, which is the shortest day, it sets at 5:18. And I think yesterday it set at 5:42. So that's an extra 24 minutes, and you can start to see a difference. So anyway, I try to play mental games with myself. I know it's cold and -3 out or whatever, but hey, at least spring's on the way, right? You can see stuff's getting better. So something to look forward to. And as I said, we've got some good things happening in Washington D.C. of all places. We've got Donald Trump being inaugurated, which again, I really didn't think that we were probably going to see that. But it's happened here, and I am thankful, and I don't want to give you the impression, that because some people like to say, oh, well, you want to worship Donald Trump or something like this. Well, no, it's not a matter of anything like that. But what it is, it's a matter of is we had a choice of worse and we had a choice of better this past election. We had a choice about installing an administration that would be more biblical in its thinking, or one that was less biblical. The Trump administration is not going to be perfect. There's going to be sin that comes along with it, but I think we are much better off, and I am thankful. I thank the Lord that we have Donald Trump being inaugurated on Monday and not Kamala Harris. We are a better nation for that. And so that's something that, I rejoice in it. And I have to remind myself of this because, it's so easy for me to be negative about things. And yet here we do. We have something I think that's a good thing. That's probably something that a lot of us didn't expect. I know that I didn't expect to see happen, and I'm glad for it. So, and I thank God for it. So I will go on the record as saying that. But there's a few other things here about the inauguration. I mentioned here in this Epic Times story, of course, they're taking it indoors because of the temperatures. Now, some people have said, well, maybe it's also because of security. And, I think that's probably not crazy. I mean, it could very well be some of both. Now, here we go. This is from Reuters. Here's a story. Thousands gathered in Washington to protest Trump inauguration. And if you read through this, this is a story from today, January 18th. Thousands of people gathered in Washington on Saturday to protest President-elect Donald Trump's inauguration, as activists for women's rights, racial justice, and other causes rallied against incoming policies they say will threaten their constitutional rights during the Republican second term. Now, of course, we already had 4 years of Donald Trump. And I just wonder for these people, what exactly horrible thing happened to you in the 4 years of Donald Trump? I mean, ask yourself that, because, I don't think, I think you'd be hard pressed to find anything. But these people are upset. And of course, you have a right to protest. You have a right to disagree with Donald Trump. You do have that First Amendment right. It continues here. Some of the crowd wore pink hats that marked the much larger protest against Trump's first inauguration in 2017. Yeah, they had that women's march, and that was kind of a big deal. That was one where Madonna had some things to say about the White House, and she ended up getting a visit from the FBI for some of the language that she used, implying some violence. Probably didn't actually literally mean what she said, but it's not a smart thing to do, to say the sort of things that she did say. But now this is an interesting comment here. It says protests against Trump's inauguration were much smaller this time, in part because the U.S. women's rights movement seems more fractured to many activists after Trump defeated Democratic Vice President Kamala Harris in November. Organizers predicted 50,000 would attend, while local police expected about 25,000. More than 300 other marches were planned nationwide. Now, that's the Reuters story. Now, there's a story here in the BBC that talks about the same thing. And I think according to the BBC, this protest had only about 5,000 turned up. So the organizers had expected 50,000, but about 5,000 turned up. So, that's a pretty big difference, 1/10 the size of the crowd. It really doesn't seem like the same kind of energy is out there as was the case in 2017. I mean, there was, there were quite a number of people who were arrested for felony rioting at Trump's first inauguration, and yet they were all somehow remarkably let go, and were not. I don't believe any of them were prosecuted, if I recall correctly. But yeah, the energy, the opposition, the protest against Donald Trump, they don't seem to have the force behind them that they did 8 years ago. Now, it's hard to believe that's 8 years ago, too, because it doesn't seem like it's anywhere near that long. But here's a picture of some of the protesters here. Let's see, not much else there. Now, here's an interesting comment. Now, this is actually from Donald Trump himself. Now, this is from Truth Social. Now, this is a little bit of a change of topic here. And as kind of moving into some comments, we'll cover some of the immigration angle here, as I always like to do on most of my podcasts. I thought this was a good way of introducing this because this was something that Donald Trump put out on Truth Social. See, it was on January 14th, so that was earlier this week. And this is what Trump said. This is actually a very good statement. He's talking about the wildfires out there in California and in LA, and he says the actual irony: a homeowner consents to pay property taxes that will go to the fire department. The funds are diverted to illegal immigrants because LA is a sanctuary city. An illegal immigrant comes and sets your house on fire, and the fire department doesn't have the resources to put it out. The homeowner paid for their own destruction. On top of that, the government is so inept that the insurance companies won't insure houses here anymore. So the homeowner is left with nothing. Yeah, that's actually really a very good summation of what's been going on out there in California. As taxpayers, these people they pay these taxes supposedly to the fire department and other government agencies that are supposed to take care of things. Not just fire department put them out, but there are agencies that are supposed to be in charge of doing some of the work to prevent the fires from starting in the first place, which apparently doesn't get done. But they can import massive numbers of illegal aliens. LA is a sanctuary city. And then I guess they arrested that illegal alien with a blowtorch. Was that about a week back? Seriously? But yeah, that's the kind of stuff that's going on. And so essentially, and I think the bottom line is that the homeowner paid for their own destruction. And that's one of the things that I've been saying for a long time about this whole illegal immigration fiasco that's been ginned up principally by the Roman Catholic Church, but by other groups as well. But what ends up happening is, as Americans, we get to pay for our own destruction. Whether it's and whether these are Americans they're living in LA, or whether these are Americans that are living in other parts of the country. You have terrible things happening to people. Think Laken Riley, the young woman who is a young nursing student who was killed by an illegal alien in a very brutal way. And so, you end up, not only do you have your country destroyed, but you have the privilege of paying to have it destroyed. What a great deal. And that's basically what the Democrats, that was their platform. Hey, vote for us, and we're bringing 1 billion illegal aliens, force you to pay for them and kill you. That's kind of their platform. And it's kind of funny in some ways because, after the election, you have these very somber Democrats and they be discussing, well, why did we lose? And some of them, not all of them, but some of them would say, well, it was our messaging. We just didn't get our messaging out the way we wanted to. Well, no, actually, they did get their messaging out loud and clear. The problem is, basically, their message was, well, we hate you and we want terrible things to happen to you. You deserve to be punished. That was their message. And it's just like Joe Biden. Joe Biden leaving the White House. I'm not sorry to see the man go. He's done nothing but insult huge swaths of the American people over the past several years with his rhetoric. It's one of the things, and this is something that an observer noted early on in Biden's presidency, because Joe Biden was sharply critical on many occasions, not of just Donald Trump, but actually of his supporters. And it was really Biden's going after Trump supporters that was remarkable. And that's what this individual was talking. I can't remember who it was, or somebody I saw on TV, and he was absolutely right. He was a TV commentator, and he made this point that of course, in American political tradition, in a republic, you're allowed to go after your opponent. You're allowed to say, my opponent's a scoundrel. My opponent has bad ideas. My opponent is going to do all this terrible stuff. You're allowed to do that. You can make those arguments. You're allowed to oppose somebody politically. That's okay. You have a First Amendment right to do that. But it has always been the understanding that you don't go after your opponent's supporters. I mean, now it's not a constitutional thing. I mean, if Joe Biden wants to get up there and insult me and people like me, I mean, he has a constitutional right to do that. But it's really not a good look. It's a bad idea. And I mean, there are times that, I mean, it was frankly a bit chilling to me to listen to some of Joe Biden's rhetoric and some of the way that he would talk about me and talk about others like me. And well, it was a big problem. It was very disturbing to hear that. I've never heard a president consistently talk that way. I mean, Barack Obama had some of his comments like that, his bitter clingers speech, and then of course you had Hillary and her deplorables comments and things of this sort. But Joe Biden really raised the bar, not only in the things that he said, but in the frequency that he said them. I mean, he said this repeatedly throughout his administration. And no, I'm not sorry to see him go at all. I don't think he was ever, legitimately elected, and he certainly doesn't have any business, no, he doesn't have any business getting a second term. And I am very thankful to the Lord that he is going. I call him Jesuit Joe, and he really does have very close Jesuit connections. He was going to go over and pay a visit to Pope Francis back on the 10th. I guess that would have been last weekend, maybe last Friday, I guess it was. But he, I guess, with all the wildfires and all that stuff, I guess he felt it wasn't proper to go to fly to Italy and fly to Rome and have his audience with his boss in the Vatican. So he decided to stay here, and instead he awarded Pope Francis the the Presidential Medal of Freedom with distinction. As we talked about last week. I guess it seems like in the Biden regime, the worse the person is, the more likely he is to get a Presidential Medal of Freedom. So there's that. But yeah, hey, moving on here a little bit more to the immigration angle. There was some stuff. I went out this just even this evening was reading through some things. If you want to find out what the Roman Catholic Church thinks about immigration and just to get a sense for the level of the immigration treason that is constantly put out by various organizations of the Roman Catholic Church, just go to, there's a feed on X. It's called Justice for Immigrants. That's a sub-organization under the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. And I mean, they just put out just total bilge water and really treasonous nonsense in their in what they say. And I mean, it's just this constant stream. It's like almost like a fire hose of this stuff. I mean, here's a letter. This is one they said. This is dated January 13th. It's addressed to some senators, and it's talking about the incoming administration, or the incoming Trump administration, the Republicans. But it talks here. Let's see. So make sure I get to the right space here. There we go. Inclusion of, and this is a segment of a longer letter, but what they say, here's what it says, quote, inclusion of immigrant and mixed status families. In speaking about the relationship between families and the economy, we must also recognize the central role of immigrant families within our society and a country fundamentally shaped by the contributions of immigrants, both culturally and economically. We can't accept policies that unjustly exclude newcomers, especially when we continue to rely on and collectively benefit from their labor. Well, not so much. And notice here they use that obscuring term, newcomers. These people showed up. Oh, hey, hey, we're your new neighbors. No, I mean, these people are illegal aliens. And of course, Rome can't use honest language about the illegal aliens, because those are the people they're promoting. This is the Vatican policy, to flood the United States of America with illegal aliens and put it in a position where Rome can increase its power over the United States. I've talked about this before. I mean, that is called irredentism. That is Jesuit immigration warfare being conducted on the United States by flooding the United States with all of these illegal aliens, which they like to call newcomers. That just sounds so nice, doesn't it? And anyway, they continue on here. With strong scriptural foundation, the social doctrine of the church clearly affirms that families of migrants have the right to the same protection as accorded to other families. Well, no. And they try to tell you the Catholic social teaching has strong scriptural foundations, which it does not. Roman Catholic social teaching is essentially fascist, um, with some strong elements of communism in it as well. And there is no support in Scripture for the kinds of teachings of the Roman Catholic Church and the kinds of attacks that Rome makes on sovereign nations. It's actually a remarkably evil thing. I mean, Rome, and I've said this before, I will say it again, the Roman Catholic Church is the premier globalist organization in the world. And really the way that you need to understand, we talk so much about globalism and the threats of globalism. What you have to understand is that globalism is principally driven by Rome. The New World Order. You probably all heard of the term the New World Order. I remember, I think it was George H.W. Bush, the elder, the first Bush president. In the late 80s or early 90s, he got up and he started talking about the New World Order. People were like, what? What's this? This is some weird sort of, I don't know, almost, some people call it a messianic sounding term. Others call it sort of like an Orwellian sort of a term. But George H.W. Bush was the first one I remember ever talking about the New World Order, at least publicly. Well, the New World Order is just another word for globalism. Globalism is Roman Catholic geopolitics. That's what it is. And the opposite of the New World Order is the Westphalian World Order, or the WWO. The Westphalian World Order is geopolitical Protestantism. One of the principles of the Westphalian World Order is that the national government is the highest level of government, and that each individual nation state is really a legal person in international law. That nation state has rights. We talk about like a corporation is a legal person, not a natural person, but it's a legal person that has rights very much like a natural person does. Well, it's the same with nations in international law. I mean, you can't invade a nation. You can't or shouldn't interfere with a foreign nation's internal affairs. You shouldn't meddle in foreign nations. You can't you can't steal national property, one nation from another. So that's the Westphalian World Order. Basically, it applies the Ten Commandments to the legal person of the nation state. And of course, Rome's very unhappy about that because Rome is globalist. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church is the premier globalist organization in the world. They want to rule the world. They want the Antichrist Pope to run the entire world. They had this thing, when a pope was put in office. For some reason it's escaping me the right term for when a pope took the office of the papacy, but he would be crowned with this tiara as a triple crown, and the triple crown represented the triple powers of the pope. That he was governor of the world, father of kings, and vicar of Christ. And I mean, that's, of course, he's none of those things, but that's how that's how the Roman Catholic Church styles them. That's how the Pope styled themselves. But Romanism is globalism. So when you hear about the globalists, think the Roman Catholic Church. Now, again, there are other types of globalists. There are other people that like globalism as well. But the Roman Catholic Church is the premier organization. It's not the World Economic Forum. It's not the United Nations. It's the Roman Catholic Church. And these bishops, I mean, these bishops in the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops constantly attack the sovereignty of the United States of America. I mean, they do this every day, 24/7, 365 days a year. They never stop. And this letter is just, I could sit here and go, I could write a lengthy article every single day. I could dedicate an entire website just to Rome's attack on the sovereignty of the United States of America. And I would have an endless supply of material. I mean, it's amazing how much of this stuff there is, and it never stops. Let's see. Here's another, just another example. Okay, so this is from the National Catholic Reporter, and it's got a headline here: In Newark, Catholic bishops host interfaith leaders to oppose mass deportation. So this is dated January 15th, and this is just a few days ago, 3 days ago. And you've got this uh, photograph here. It says Bishop Mark Seitz, center with microphone with Cardinal Joseph Tobin left and Pastor Omar Coronado right during the interfaith gathering presented by the Archdiocese of Newark in Faith in Action at St. Lucy's Catholic Church, January 13th, 2025 in Newark, New Jersey. That's interesting. It says Pastor Coronado. It almost makes it sound like maybe he's kind of like an evangelical. Well, that's the only time they mentioned him in this article. I have to look into that. That's interesting. Maybe because it does say it's interfaith, so I mean, maybe they got some evangelical dupe to come in and play footsie with Antichrist here. But anyway, yeah. So you've got this bishop. Now, Bishop Mark Seitz, he is the bishop of El Paso, but he is also, I think his term. I think what is he? He's the chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops Migration Committee. So, El Paso, Texas is on the border. It's in extreme western Texas, right on the Rio Grande, right across from Juarez, Mexico. And it's one of the big battlegrounds, one of the big crossing points for illegal immigrants. And of course, this bishop, so he does his work there locally in El Paso, but he's also taken it national as chairman of the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops. They call it the Migration Committee. It's really the Illegal Alien Committee. And their job is to find a way how to flood the United States with as many illegal aliens as possible. That's what Bishop Mark Seitz's job is. But he says here, with the risk of losing part of our soul as a nation. So this is a time of great concern. Well, notice, and this is maybe the big thing, the big takeaway that you should take anytime you read one of these articles, whether it's quoting a bishop or from some Roman Catholic source talking about immigration. They always, I can't emphasize this enough, they always take the sides of the illegal aliens. In fact, what's good for you or for me as an American, that matters not in the least to them. They have zero compassion on the American people. Now, sometimes they have some sort of window dressing rhetoric to make it sound like they actually do care, but they don't. I mean, when push comes to shove, you and I are simply, if you're an American citizen, your job is just to fork it over. That is, fork over your money, your country, anything the bishops demand, and shut up. That's your job. And that's what Mark Seitz wants you to do. Your job is to shut up and fork your property over because you deserve. These illegal aliens deserve it, and you don't. It's your punishment. So just keep your mouth shut and take your beating. The beatings will continue until morale improves, something like that. So yeah, and here's the thing about this again. I don't even have to try hard to find these kinds of stories. It's just a flood of this stuff. And one of the things, and I think I've got a few of these articles here saved. Hopefully we get to them here. But where the Roman Catholic Church is talking about, they're warning about deportations. They're very much concerned about that. And of course, here's one of the articles, one we just looked at, where they oppose mass deportation. I guarantee you, when those deportations start, you're going to see Mark Seitz, and you're going to see these other bishops out there leading the charge to, crying and weeping and wailing and, donning sackcloth and ashes and, rending their clothes and all this other stuff over these poor put upon newcomers who are being deported. Well, they need to be deported. I mean, we need mass deportations. This needs to happen. This is an existential issue. Sometimes that word existential, people use that, I think, maybe a little bit too liberally. But when you describe something as existential, I mean, it simply means that it is a matter of life and death. It is either it's do or die. If you don't get this thing done, whatever it is, if you don't deal with this existential threat, you are history, so to speak, as a nation. And yeah, this whole thing with the Biden regime flooding the United States with I don't know 10 million plus I don't even know what the number is, whatever the obscene number is. That is an existential threat to the United States of America. This has to be dealt with. And of course, the people who are fighting it the hardest are these treasonous bishops. Let's see here. Oh, here's another one. We were just talking a little bit about Mark Seitz. Here he is here in this picture here. And this is in another immigration-related story. And this time it says, Texas Supreme Court to decide legal battle over El Paso migrant shelter's future. And here's the header here. It says, Bishop Mark Seitz, right, here he is right here, speaks at a press conference in El Paso alongside Ruben Garcia, director of the Annunciation House, on February 23rd, 2024. So, yeah, the Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, has been going after this migrant shelter in El Paso, Texas, called Annunciation House. And he basically accuses them of essentially aiding and abetting illegal immigration in the United States. Now, what the thing that's interesting is the Annunciation House so far has been able to, so far as I can tell anyway, has been able to dodge discovery. In other words, the state government, Ken Paxton's office, they subpoenaed them and requested certain documents. And as far as I am aware, Annunciation House has yet to turn over any documents. Now, maybe they have done some. I haven't followed every twist and turn of this particular story, but I have followed it some of the past year. And as far as I am aware, they have not turned over any evidence. My guess is they probably spent most of the last year destroying evidence, if I had to guess. Again, I can't prove that, but that seems like that's typically how that happens. We just don't know where all those records went. Yeah, I'm sure. But so yeah. Anyway, so here's Mark Seitz. Once again, he's defending illegal immigration, and he's defending those who support, aid and abet illegal immigration into the United States of America. In fact, here it says what the Attorney General's office has argued. Paxton's office, which has argued that shelter network should be closed for violating state laws against human smuggling and operating a stash house. A stash house is a place where you get a whole bunch of illegal aliens. They come crossing over the border, and you take them, you stick them in a house, and you keep them there temporarily until you can get them on a bus and send them to Chicago or New York or LA or some other sanctuary city. It's basically a collection point. It's basically what it's described as. It's a sanctuary. It's a stash house. It's a place where you temporarily house illegal aliens. Annunciation House's lawyers have characterized the state's arguments as utter nonsense, arguing that Paxton's efforts violate the First Amendment, which guarantees the right to free speech, association, and religion, and the Fourth Amendment, which offers protection against unreasonable search and seizures. Well, I mean, yeah, the First Amendment does offer free speech, but it doesn't allow you to commit a crime. And yeah, it does allow for freedom of religion, but it doesn't permit the Roman Catholic Church from subverting the American Republic. You don't have that right. They don't have that right. And I suspect very strongly that they're probably guilty as charged. And again, I don't have evidence because, of course, the Annunciation House hasn't provided any evidence because they won't cooperate with the subpoenas, and they spend all the time trying to tie this case up in court. I hope, my prayer would be that the Texas Supreme Court will rule in favor of the Attorney General office, and that they would be able to get hold of the evidence that the Annunciation House has been up to some, I think probably some pretty foul business. I suspect very strongly that they are guilty of doing those sorts of things, guilty of essentially immigration treason. So let's see, what else do we have here? Oh yeah, now this is, again, I call him Jesuit Joe for a reason, of course. Joe Biden, he has very close ties to the Jesuit order. And now the Jesuit order is not the only group within the Roman Catholic Church that pushes for illegal immigration and for that pushes irredentist policies, that whole immigration warfare. that the Roman Catholic Church conducts. It's not exclusively Jesuit, but again, Jesuits are kind of the heart of the matter. Yeah, in fact, interesting. I had a great opportunity to sit and talk with Chris Pinto last week. Did an interview with him last Saturday. The podcast version of that is posted on the Trinity Foundation website. He's such a great speaker. And, one of the things that he said was very interesting because we were talking about his most recent film, American Jesuits. And one of the things he said to me that really stuck with me was that, essentially the Jesuits have said to the Jesuits were created as part of the Counter-Reformation in the 1500s. That is, they were part of the Roman Catholic Church's attempt to stamp out the Reformation and win back the territories that had been lost to the preaching of the gospel. They were very upset that people were being saved and coming to faith in the Lord Jesus Christ and salvation by faith alone in Him. I didn't like that one bit. They wanted to put a stop to this. So there was this Counter-Reformation, and one of the big components of it was the Jesuits. And one of the things that Chris Pinto said is that the Jesuits' message to the rest of the Catholic Church was basically, hey, you guys failed to put a stop to the Reformation. We've got a plan. You need to listen to us. And so, they have really taken the lead, in the last roughly 500 years at trying to roll back the Reformation. And, we have this president who, is effectively, I would say he is a Jesuit. He has very deep Jesuit ties. There's a term, the Jesuit of the short robe, that's sometimes been used. And that simply describes somebody who is a Jesuit or works for the Jesuits, even though that individual is maybe not necessarily formally connected with them. Joe Biden himself, is not at least as far as we know anyway, publicly. He's not a member of the Jesuit religious order, but he has many close ties to the Jesuits. He attends a Jesuit church. He had a Jesuit speak at his inauguration. When he took the oath of office, he used a Douay Rheims Jesuit translation. He put his right hand on that Bible. He has close ties to Pope Francis. I know we talked about that, I think, a bit last week. So yeah, I call him Jesuit Joe. And so the Biden administration announced a sweeping deportation shield for nearly 1 million migrants. This is another one of Joe's parting gifts, and this was on January the 10th. It says the Biden administration announced Friday that nearly 1 million migrants from Sudan, Ukraine, El Salvador, and Venezuela, a breeding ground for members of the vicious gang Tren de Aragua, will be able to stay in the U.S. for the next year and a half, dealing a blow to President-elect Donald Trump's hardline immigration agenda. Well, it is a blow, but it's not going to stop the deportations. And what this is there's this just. I would again call it a treasonous program. They call it temporary protected status, but it's allowing these people to stay here in the United States of America. They really have no legitimate business being in the United States of America and who need to go. And if they stay here for another year and a half, well, then they need to go after that. This nonsense needs to stop. Let's see what else we have here. Here's something from. Let's see. This is from the Catholic Review analysis. Migrants in U.S. programs highly vulnerable to mass deportation push. Well, if they're here illegally, well, good. They need to go. They could leave right now on their own accord if they wanted to, and if they're smart, they will. I would hope that they would have enough sense to say, the jig is up and it's time to head back home. They have that opportunity to do that. They can do it the easy way or they can do it the hard way. But allowing these people to stay in the country, allowing these people to forcing the United States or American citizens to support them with their tax dollars. This is an outrage, and this needs to stop. Let's see, here's another one. Bishop says Lake and Riley Act mass deportations are vigilante approach. Well, no, they're not. Vigilante approach, usually the word vigilante, that describes people who, sort of take the law, private citizens who take the law into their own hands. This is not vigilante approach. This is a lawful approach. Deportations, these things are, when they're done, they will be done under the the rubric of law under legal resolutions. So no, it's not vigilante justice. And this bishop who's talking this stuff, I guess this guy's name, Nicholas DiMarzio. Yeah, I mean he's not a good guy, and he's certainly not someone who has the interest of the American Republic at heart. Here's another story. This one's it says Reuters, 500,000 school-age migrant children have arrived since 2022. Can you imagine that? 500,000. And this gets back to this whole cost issue, right? I mean, 500,000 children, all of whom, according to federal law, you and I have to pay for their education. I think I did a piece a week or two back. I had a friend from Texas send me an article talking about how in Dallas, Fort Worth, the Catholic Charities was working hard to funnel all these illegal alien children to this school, this English as a second language school. Well, those things cost a fortune. And the American people are being forced to subsidize this stuff. That is, they're being forced to subsidize the destruction of their own countries via their tax dollars. So you got that going on. And let's see, what else do we have here? That's the same story. Here's a story. Now, this is completely on a different tack here. But I wanted to at least mention it here. This is a story from January the 9th. So it's about a week old here. But it says Anita Bryant, who's anti-gay politics, undid a singing career, is dead at 84. Now, this is from the New York Times. Now, of course, they're not going to cut her any slack or to be at all friendly to her. And it continues here. It says the former beauty queen and spokesman for Florida Orange Juice was an all-American entertainer before she began crusading against LGBTQ rights. And just a few thoughts on that. I mean, I remember her from the 1970s. When I was a kid, she had talks about her being a spokeswoman for Florida Orange Juice. I guess that's the thing that I remember the most were the ads that she did for Florida Orange Juice. And that, I think that's really how I first got to know her name. And then later in the 1970s, she became very outspoken against the homosexual agenda, and became well known for that. And so it continues here. Anita Bryant, the singer and former beauty queen who had a flourishing music career in the 1960s and 70s, but whose opposition to gay rights she called homosexuality an abomination. Well, it is. That's biblical language. That's what God calls it. He calls it an abomination. So she was entirely right about that, much to the chagrin of the New York Times. It says virtually destroyed her career and died on December 16th at her home in Edmond, Oklahoma. She was 84. The cause was cancer, her son William Green said. And let's see. So it kind of continues on here for a bit. It says she went on USO tours with Bob Hope, performed during Billy Graham's evangelical tours and co-hosting national televised parades, sang the national anthem at the Super Bowl, and it doesn't give a year there. Most memorably, she represented the Florida Citrus Commission in a long campaign of television commercials in which she sang, "Come to Florida Sunshine Tree." Come to the Florida Sunshine Tree, sorry. And offered the tagline, "Breakfast without orange juice is like a day without sunshine." Yeah, I remember that. Like I said, it's hard for me to believe, I mean, this was almost 50 years ago, or right around 50 years ago. Sometimes I forget I'm pushing 60. That seems hard to believe. But yeah, so I remember that stuff. And it says, now this is interesting. I've forgotten some of the details here, but it talks about her. It goes on some about her campaign, her work for the Florida Citrus Commission. But then it gets down to it's kind of the brass tacks here. It says, then in early 1977, Dade County, Florida, which includes Miami, where I'll call her Mrs. Bryant. They have Ms. I hate that. I really despise that. That's feminism. And I think, I won't go off a long tangent on this, but I will say I do believe feminism is one of the most inhumane and destructive philosophies that has ever seen widespread adoption. I mean, it is seriously degrading and destroying our society in so many ways. But anyway, see the Times continues. Um, talking about Dade County, Florida, gave its final approval to an ordinance prohibiting discrimination against homosexuals. Oh, and by the way, feminism and homosexuality have a very close relationship. And if you think about it, it really shouldn't be surprising, because feminism, on the one hand, believes in the equality of men and women. And when they say equality, I mean, depending on the feminist, I mean, they literally mean equality in every possible way. That is not what the Bible teaches. Now, the Bible teaches that we have men and women have equal dignity before God, that they bear the image of God, but they are not the same. There is actually a thing, there are roles for men and roles for women. And I know that drives some people up the wall, but that's the revealed word of God. I know that the feminists hate the patriarchy, but patriarchy is God's will for the human race. Just means the rule of the fathers, or rule by fathers, and that is God's design for mankind. That's not a bad thing. It's a good thing. And the lack of that is one of the major things destroying Western society. But anyway, I didn't mean to go off on a tangent on the word "ms," but that's a term that I truly hate and despise with all my heart. But anyway, it continues here. A group of opponents led by Mrs. Bryant turned up to protest. The ordinance condones immorality and discriminates against my children's rights to grow up in a healthy, decent community, end quote, she said. Well, yeah, she's right about that. She founded Save Our Children, an anti-gay organization that gave rise to the modern-day religious rights strategy of tying homosexuality to perceived threats against children. Well, I mean, it's not just a strategy; it's also the truth. I guess you have a strategy of telling the truth. Well, I mean, I guess if that's the about homosexuality and those who practice it. Well, I guess if that's a strategy, well, that's a good strategy, I would say. It continues here. Her public image, many call her a Christian celebrity, was changed forever. Yeah, I think that's a true statement. I mean, it certainly was changed permanently. It talks about that she was blacklisted. And continues here. Let's see. Someone says pushed a banana cream pie in her face. Yeah, and I think this is a good reminder here too. I mean, all of this homosexuality agenda, this was going on back in 1977. So that's 48 years ago, almost 50 years ago. And so, I mean, the stuff that you see going on now, with the same-sex marriage and all of the stuff with the transgenderism and homosexual, these kinds of things. This stuff has been going on for really over 50 years. Usually the homosexual rights movement is generally traced back to 1969 specifically. They call it the Stonewall riots that took place in New York City, I believe it was in the summer of that year. So, I mean, here we are, this was 8 years later in 1977, and you see this stuff spreading across the nation at the time. So this has been going on a while, a good long while. And it's been going really basically my entire life. But it just took time to get to the level where we see it today. She says here, I don't regret it because I did the right thing. Anita Bryant said in a 1990 television interview, sometimes you have to pay a price for what you believe is right. Well, that's true. That is a biblical perspective. She was right about that. It goes on to say she was born on March 25th, 1940, in her grandparents' home in Barnesdale, Oklahoma. Okay, well, that's I have my grandpa Matthews. He was born in Oklahoma. The Matthews family were living in Oklahoma about 100 years ago. So, got maybe kind of a very distant tie in there. Anyway, she was an Oklahoman, and my grandpa he was a native of Oklahoma as well. And let's see here. So it says, she sang in church, local fairgrounds in her teens, appeared on the Tulsa and Oklahoma City television stations. So she was actually really pretty close to the same age as my parents. Talks about some of her hits singing anyway. So Anita Bryant. I mean, there's of course, I mean the New York Times, other people like that. Obviously don't like her very much, but I think that she's someone who who did speak a lot of truth. And so we're sorry to hear of her passing, but believe she is with the Lord even now. Now here's something here that was very interesting. I remember years ago, we had this book. I think it was in one of my English classes or reading classes. Called Serendipity, and the term was at least the way it was given to us. The meaning of that word serendipity is sort of an accidental discovery. And what was interesting here is I had kind of an experience with that this past week. I found something that I wasn't even looking for, and it just kind of happened to pop up as I was going through some things on X. This was put out by somebody named Aaron M. Wren. I'm not familiar with him, but here's what he said. He says, by the way, the word is getting out to evangelical parents that Hillsdale, he's talking here about Hillsdale College, is a Catholic conversion factory. It'll be interesting to see how this affects college choice going forward. And you reading through some of the comments by people, you find apparently that there are numbers of Hillsdale College students are converting to Roman Catholicism. I did not know that. And in fact, I found a couple of articles. Here's one. In fact, this is from the Catholic News Agency. It says, Wheel of Fortune's Pat Sajak is key leader at Hillsdale College, a hub for Catholic converts. So this is dated September 3rd, 2023. So it's about, not quite a year and a half old. But it says Pat Sajak, the longtime host of popular television game show Wheel of Fortune, will be retiring after this upcoming season. After more than 40 years in that role, Sajak is like a member of the family for the show's millions of fans. A lesser known fact about the Emmy winner is that he is the chair of the board of trustees at Hillsdale College, a small Christian classical liberal arts school in southern Michigan that is often branded as conservative, in which one magazine is even described as being at the heart of the culture wars. Founded by Free Will Baptist slavery abolitionists in 1844, Hillsdale defines itself as non-sectarian Christian. But Sajak's many Catholic fans might be interested to know that Hillsdale has a thriving Catholic community of students and faculty and has become something of a hub for converts of the Catholic faith. So you've got this Catholic paper boasting about all these Catholic conversions that are going on. It says here an average of about 15 students from Hillsdale convert to Catholicism each year. Kelly Cole, a volunteer and member of the parish council at nearby St. Anthony Catholic Church, which ministers to the students, told CNA, the Catholic News Agency. So, I did not expect that. I was a bit surprised at that. And so anyway, that's something to keep in mind when you see people talking about Hillsdale College. I had never heard that before, and I wasn't even looking for that particular story. It more or less popped up on my X timeline, quite to my surprise. So anyway, a bit of serendipity. Well, I think that's probably a good point to wrap things up here for today. It's been a long day. I was in investing seminar for a good chunk of yesterday and today, and I'm kind of tired. So anyway, I think I'll wrap it up here and get this podcast edited and get it posted out there. It's great to have everybody here with me tonight. Thank you for joining me on the live stream. I appreciate that. And until next time, may the Spirit of truth guide you in all truth as you read and study God's Word.